Hey guys, how we doing? My name is Roberto Baptiste. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Proud American Show. Um, this episode is a bit sad for me. Sad in the sense of uh, with the Parkland shooting and everything else that's been happening in our country. It's kind of sad to see the debate afterwards. While it saddens me to see the lack of depth in the debate after we've lost some of our young and brightest with regards to a future is disheartening. But in there, the first few days, I was watching the news like you guys, discouraged really with what I saw was going on. But out of nowhere, hope came in the sense of young people getting engaged like never before. And it's been a blessing to witness it because far too long I hear some of my friends that have older children always complain of how their kids are so detached from everything, they only play video games and what have you. In the wake or in the aftermath, rather, of such a tragedy of such great proportion, I've seen young people in this country show us, teach us as adults what it's like to be responsible. And for that, I'm eternally grateful to them because it was a wake up call. Not that as a parent you don't want to protect your children, it was a wake up call to make us not take for granted the biggest and best asset that have placed under our guardianship as parents or children. So this episode is very special, special in the sense of explaining to you all that maybe the kids are right after all, and maybe y'all need to sit down and listen. How often do we go and we lecture our children about responsibility, about doing the right thing? I think after that last mass shooting, enough is enough. Yeah, we have the hashtag never again. We thought that was going to be the end of it, didn't we? But these children are out there again showing us they are not going away. These are your kids, these are my kids. How can we actually tune them off and say, we're not going to listen? We need to listen because that's their life that's at stake here. I've heard some of those parents, and I could not even go through some of the interviews that I was watching because to kiss your daughter or your son and during that morning, and that evening that child doesn't come home, and you know you have to live with that. And I've heard one dad explain how he's never gonna see his daughter again, and those words really they got stuck with me. So as a parent, as an American, I think now it's becoming our duty and our obligation to ensure that such tragedy doesn't happen anymore under our watch. We have got to do whatever is necessary to ensure the safety of our children. We can talk up a good game of national security and defense and military intervention and everything else. But why is that even important if we can't protect our own kids when they're going to school? That's our own backyard. That's our daily stuff. As parents, our kids needs to get an education. If they cannot be placed within a safe environment where they don't have to worry about their safety, everything else don't matter at this point, does it? We've failed them already. Again, they've given us an opportunity here to keep them engaged. For far too long, we've always blamed the youth for their disengagement and for not understanding the adult debate that's been going on in America. Well, I do pray that, that's the end of such foolish thoughts, and those kids would keep us accountable for a long while. The argument was always, well, they don't vote and blah 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 and all these other things. They didn't need to vote for us to take into account what they were saying. But that energy, I do hope it materialized into voting because it seems like American politicians only understand one thing: kicking them out of office. Only then they get the message that folks are truly angry, folks truly want change on how things are operated. We're not thinking or talking about minor changes here. We're talking about changes that affect the lives of the future of this country. These 17 souls could have been doctors, engineers, some of the best and brightest legal minds this country I've ever seen, some of the strongest advocates. I mean, Maybe the scientist that was going to cure cancer was among these kids. Who knows? We'll never know now. And for us in the aftermath to have the audacity to question the veracity of these kids' engagement and their appetite for true change really almost broke my spirit. But they rose above it. So I encourage each and every one of you to rise above it as well. Normally we kind of avoid the hot topics, but how can we avoid this? Because again, it boils down to the safety of our children. I would love for my kids to be able to go to school in an America where mass shooting doesn't happen. The likelihood of that is very unlikely. However, me as a parent now, I have the obligation to ensure I keep on reducing the risk each and every single day. Florida passed some type of a law where certain requirements have to be met. Florida already had a waiting period for purchasing handguns, and now there's a waiting period of 3 days as well for purchasing a rifle. Talk in town is they're going to make it easier for law enforcement officials to actually seize weapons from individuals that have been deemed mentally unfit and what have you for a certain period of time. That's all fine and dandy. But we all know what the true issue is. For us as a country to not even be able to study gun violence is ridiculous. In the aftermath of 9/11, there were colossal failure from our intelligence agencies. We put together the 9/11 Commission to study up on who wasn't communicating with who, what was going down that no one knew about, how do we fix it, how do we bridge the gap and ensure that never happen again, that we don't have a breakdown in communication that leads up to the events of 9/11 in this country ever again. That's what we said. That's what we did. We took testimony. Yes, people met. People drank coffee. People had dinner. That's what you're supposed to do when you're trying to investigate and get to the bottom of things. Well, as they've done that, they've realized, okay, we need to perhaps create one entity that's in charge of protecting the homeland. And from there, those other federal agencies, they can still feed them information. So everybody became in sync and everybody started communicating more and more. I say this because in studying issues, you come up with real solutions, tangible, logical solutions that are enforceable. But if you don't have the study and you go and you make the laws that I've seen Florida try to make, perhaps Governor Scott try to make, I have to question your motives. Governor Scott, as we know, is running for election next year. Is he really putting together, or is he really signing a bill or proposing a bill that went into a law now that he signed into a law? Was he really proposing the best version that we can think of? Or was he trying to mend the fences and ensure that he keeps his hopes alive of becoming a U.S. Senator by defeating Bill Nelson, who's a Democratic sitting senator right now? Those questions are on my mind because, again, it wasn't about the data. For me, if Governor Scott was really serious about it, perhaps he should have had a commission while putting together some of those bans, ban on assault rifle, whatever you want to name it, whatever you want to call it, by all means. Perhaps they should have done that, at least to study up those issues. A ban on assault rifle is nothing new, folks. We had one in place all the way up to 2004. Then it vanished. I hear people say, well, they can't do that. They're taking my guns away, blah, 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 and all that other stuff. Well, folks, that is not true. You can still keep your weapons. You still get to hunt and do all these different things. All that they're saying is the purchases of newer weapons, the assault rifles, AK-47, because I hear people talk a lot about the M4s, or for lack of a better word, the M16, or whatever you want to call it these days. There are multiple variety of assault rifles out there. So, for me, labeling mass murder of our children as a public health issue is vital. It's vital because we'll get the data points to analyze and ensure that not only we protect our kids from an infrastructure standpoint, meaning they are in the right buildings, that are very secure, but also we have the human element necessary to protect them. Perhaps it's more counselors in the school, guidance counselors, mental health counselors. Perhaps it's just going to be more security guards. Whatever is necessary, then we can find true logical solutions to fix the issue. How can we do that if we can't even study the issue? That's my first take on this. But then again, I'll say this. The young people have inspired me because, again, they get it. They don't want no quick fix to this because they know a quick fix is not going to keep them safe for long. They're in high school today. The last thing they would want to hear is that 5 years from now, the same school they went to, there's another mass shooting in it. I don't think anyone, a young person, want to live with that. And therefore, they are holding us accountable for things we should have done already, for things we should have fixed already. I think the heroes of 2018 are already those 17 souls that we lost, but their friends, their peers, their classmates, and classmates from around the country that came together in the aftermath and said no more. If we cannot protect our children, why do we even have a government? Why do we even have all those corporations? Everything that we do is to ensure that we pass on a better future to our kids. How do we do that if we can't even keep them alive? How do we do that by not fighting to keep them alive? There are some simple solutions, but none of those were addressed in the bill that Rick Scott signed into law, in my opinion. It was decided in the midst of a lot of controversies that they were going to start arming teachers just like they do for marshals. Folks, let me tell you, aside from the obvious issues with this, I just think that's too much of a burden to put on a teacher. You already have overcrowded classrooms. You've already had teachers that are underpaid. You already have the stress that are accompanied with being a teacher. And now on top of it, you're throwing on an extra stressor. As someone who's carried a gun for so long and been in law enforcement and firearm instructor for so long, I'll tell you right now, it could be disastrous. Even in that most calmest of situations, you put even the most trained professional in that environment, you never know what to expect. Let alone now you get someone who's not accustomed to that kind of level of stress. You bring up the heat a little bit. Now you add on some stressors. You have someone shooting at you. Fire alarms are going off. The sprinklers are going on. You really expect that teacher to do the right things and know what to do, or even then hit the bad guy that's coming at the kids? You're putting all that burden on the teacher? And in the aftermath of it, how do we save that teacher from drowning in the aftermath of it after such an incident? That cannot be the fix. Things like fixing the infrastructure has got to be a component of it. School boards were already crying foul that they were not getting enough funding in America, and I know some of the public school union folks that have been trying to get more funding from Governor Scott, and I'm going to stay in Florida here. He's refused to increase the budget for most of those school boards or the money that they get from the state. I clearly and firmly believe that those schools at the local level know best how to handle those issues. That is the primary reason why they've hired in the past professionals to ensure that they have an emergency department within the school district or the school board. Why not leave it up to those professionals to at least get to study the infrastructure that they have? Do all the schools within a particular school zone meet certain building requirements when it comes to safety? What I'm referring to, folks, is perhaps one entry, one exit point. Meaning one gate to go in, one gate to go out. Access card. Lockers where you can stash your books and everything else, and you don't have backpacks that you're carrying in and out of school. Random locker inspection. But to do that, you need to have the staff. Maybe hiring more administrative personnel. Again, common sense approach to a big issue in order to solve it for good, forever. Adding more guns and doing all that other stuff, is it really necessary at this point when you don't even know how to fix the problem? You don't even have the data to fix the problem. Our kids are dying, we know that. Some say that's all the facts we need. Yes, I get it. But there are some quick fixes that we can have in there that can make the situation even worse in the future. Arming the teachers was one of those quick fixes that people wanted to hear. Or some people, I should say. It is not the solution in my book. And that's coming from years of experience as a firearm instructor. You want to test the mantra of somebody, you put them through some firearms training, and you put somebody firing some blank cartridges at that person, and you see how they perform. What we call FX training, force on force training, simulation training. You do not know what you should expect from anyone. Once you put them out there, that's the only time you'll figure out, oh my gosh, this is how they're going to react. If you've seen grown men in the fetal position almost crying with a firearm in their hand when somebody start shooting those blanks at them, knowing that they are blanks, you'll understand why I have strong reservations for math teachers in this country to be armed. And I have all the respect for them. Their role is to teach our kids, not to carry guns and be law enforcement personnel and teachers at the same time. We already didn't pay them enough. How can we ever pay them enough to run towards danger every single day now? I'll also go back to the fact that nationwide, I've seen the light with some politicians that I never thought would acknowledge that we have a major issue on our hand. These guys have come around and they started to address it. And I get it, folks. I get it. Gun control is a sensitive topic in America throughout its history. I used to attend some classes where they said, if you're running for office, you want to stay away from the gun control debate. You don't lend an opinion on it. You don't talk about it. Well, that's all fine and dandy until it becomes the public issue, the public health issue or public health nightmare that it has become. We give dare classes to our kids. We make sure that we talk about accident prevention, don't text while you drive, and everything else. I can sit here with all the data and tell you, in 2018, the cause of death of most of our teens is higher with regards to a mass shooting than it would with things like texting while driving. Yet we've put effective laws in place to ensure that our kids don't text and drive. Why is it so hard for us to do this? Simply because of our pride of carrying a gun or having the biggest weapon out there? That make you somehow the big man in town? From my standpoint, again, I'm not here to try to denigrate your right to bear arms. That's not it at all. But when you as a parent have to decide between the safety of your children and idiots owning firearms, I think the choice is pretty clear and obvious. And I say idiots for a reason, because believe it or not, a lot of folks that own guns should not be owning weapons. If you own your gun and you don't store it properly, you leave it out in the open, you just go and you live in your car and leave your car unlocked, you're just a prey for criminals to get that weapon. You're just a prey for anybody to just steal that weapon out of your car. Now, that same weapon that was supposed to protect you and your family might be turned against you. So it's a big responsibility to own a weapon. Have you been doing your due diligence to ensure that that weapon stays safe at all time and don't fall into the wrong hands? Forget about buying the weapons now, those criminals that buy weapons and what have you. And I say criminals, those mass murderers, that's what they are as well, criminals. We want to say they're insane and all that. Yeah, that's part of the problem. I'm not going to neglect to mention that. But it takes a very deranged individual to do these things and to commit those crimes. And that does not take away from your right to own a weapon for self-defense. The debate is, how do we keep the guns away from those criminals and insane individuals? That's the debate. Do I have all the answers? Far from it, folks. I will not pretend that I do for a second. But I'll tell you again, it's about time. I pray that our kids do not let us fall asleep on this, because we've failed them for far too long. We've got to come on board and ensure we find a way to protect them and keep them safe. I'm not mentioning gun control here. I'm not talking about gun control. I'm talking about public safety, keeping our children safe. So gun control is one component of it, but looking at the entire infrastructure landscape of school safety is paramount now. How do we make sure that schools in America are safe? Obviously, we have a bigger issue to worry about when it comes to gun control than just taking the guns away that don't belong in the streets. Because it's a building problem as well. It's a roadway problem as well. Do we need to close down some roadways leading to schools as well? All those components have got to be looked into. Do we need to have more circuit TV cameras on campus or on school grounds? All these have got to be part of the solution. There is no silver bullet, excuse the language here, or the word on plate. There's none. But we need to start studying the issue in depth, because it is a public health issue. We talked about the opioid crisis. We know a whole lot about heroin and where it's coming from, where it's not coming from, fentanyl and all the other things, making sure that paramedics and other law enforcement officers have the proper reactive agent to ensure that we prevent overdose in the streets and what have you. All that has been done because there were some studies on the opioid crisis going on in America today. If you don't study the issue, you cannot come up with the solutions necessary to fix it. Simple. Yet lawmakers in America today will not let us study gun violence and mass shooting in America simply because of a paycheck they're getting from a lobbyist, or an NRA lobbyist to be precise. It can no longer be, folks. We have got to choose now between, again, our kids, protecting our way of life, and the gun industry. I've been an avid shooter, firearm instructor for years. I still am till this very day. But the choice is clear for me, because my kids are the greatest treasure that I've ever been blessed with. So even if it meant me personally going there and giving away whatever I own, I would do it, even though we will never get to such an extreme, because that's not what the law is about. The rule of law requires certain things to be kept in check, simply because we each have to give a little in order to enjoy this general freedom that we all have. You really think somehow, because we might have a background check, that they're gonna come and take your gun away? How many years has it been that you've owned those weapons? How many Democrats have sat in that office or in Congress and what have you? How many times the ATF has come knocking on your door to get your guns? That's not the issue, man. You've been brainwashed. They've been trying to brainwash you into thinking that's the issue. And now we have our kids dying till this very day still to guns that other children that should never have their hands on. Ever. So if you're a safe manufacturer, maybe that's the plug for you as well, because we need better way of storing the weapons as well that we own. If we know especially that some of our kids have some mental health issues, we need to keep guns away from them. Be a responsible parent. How about that as well? Again, I don't want to end this just talking to some folks about personal responsibility because, like I said, it's been humbling. It's been humbling to see young people in America coming together the way they have had for the month-long mourning that it's been since Parkland. 17 beautiful souls that we'll never see again. But 17 beautiful souls that is a reminder that this should never happen ever, ever again. Not in America, not anywhere in the world. No parents, I repeat, no parents should ever have to bury their kids for any reason, let alone to gun violence, mass shooting that we could have prevented. My name is Roberto Baptiste. You've watched another episode of the Proud American Show. Again, never again. Let's keep our kids safe. Let's make sure we protect the best treasure we've ever been blessed with, our children. God bless.